Jiang approached the boss's corpse, started staring at it intently. He couldn't believe that he had finally defeated it. At that moment, a system window appeared to congratulate him for leveling up. Now he was level 14, had a power evaluation of 127 stars, and the passive abilities and level-up effects were still in effect. Jiang clenched his fist and it began to glow. He slightly lowered his head towards it, and with a smile he thought that as the level increased, the strength also continued to increase. He had 127 stars, which meant that his individual combat power was already almost equivalent to that of a level 25 professional in the combat class. He began to turn his head back, and thought that now he only had to devour the corpses of the monsters and obtain devouring points. Seeing how powerful Jiang was and feeling the power of the mother insect, the small spiders started fleeing from the area. They were intelligent monsters, and were fully aware that they had no chance of winning against Jiang. He turned his head back, and upon seeing the little spiders fleeing, he thought there was no longer any threat. It didn't take him long to realize that these spiders had understood the situation and were therefore escaping. Despite wanting to kill these monsters to earn points, he decided not to do so, as the most important thing now was to start breeding insects. He began walking towards the corpses of the monsters, and little by little, Little Nine started manifesting through the poisonous mist. With a killer look, Jiang began to stare at the boss's corpse, clenched his fist tightly, extended the other one towards the sky, and told Little Nine that now it belonged to her. Upon hearing this, she thanked him and then returned to her natural form. She then opened her mouth, took a leap, and started moving towards the boss's corpse. She began to devour the corpse, and a system window appeared to grant him 600 devouring points. While Little Nine was enjoying her meal, Jiang turned his body to the side, and with a serious look, he thought that elite monsters like this boss were different from the others, since they could provide a high devouring value. He didn't take long to come to the conclusion that hunting and quickly breeding the swarm of insects was a good way to become stronger and hunt more elite monsters. Several seconds later, another system window appeared in front of him to inform him that the devouring value was full. The system asked him if he wanted to start the insect breeding. Jiang began to look at the system window, and upon seeing how quickly the devouring value had filled up, he was amazed. He soon realized that elite monsters gave much more points than normal monsters. Several seconds later, Little Nine returned to her human form, knelt before him, placing one hand on her knee and the other on the ground. Then she bowed her head before him and informed him that Little Nine was already ready to reproduce. She asked him to allow her to continue following him with a much stronger power. While Jiang's body was emanating a powerful aura, he turned his head to the side and remained silent for several seconds, lost in his thoughts. He slightly turned his head towards her, and with a smile, he decided it was time to start breeding the insects. At that moment, a system window appeared to inform him that Little Nine had already started the first generation of mass insect breeding. Jiang's body and Little Nine's body began to emit a wave of energy, and the system informed him that the accelerated growth of talents and the blessing of the growth of all things were in effect. With a serious look, Jiang started to gaze at Little Nine and thought to himself that his passive skills were more effective for accelerating the insect breeding. Several seconds later, the mark of Little Nine appeared on his hand. Upon seeing this, he didn't take long to realize that this was a new ability. His assumption was correct, as a system window appeared to grant him 2 new exclusive abilities called Insect Nest and Dominion. Then, another system window appeared to inform him that the insect breeding had been accelerated, and there were 8 seconds remaining. Seeing this, Jiang thought that the insect breeding was almost complete. Jiang lifted his head towards the sky, and upon seeing what was in front of him, he was shocked. He couldn't help but be amazed and wonder if this was a colony of insects. In front of him stood Little Nine, with both hands extended to the sides and reproducing itself. In the blink of an eye, thousands of insects appeared and started flying around them. The system congratulated Jiang for successfully completing the breeding of the first swarm of insects. According to the system, there were a total of 300 insects. Jiang turned his head to one side, and while he was observing the insects, he started to smile and thought that the quantity was truly impressive. He couldn't believe that the first breeding cycle of the insects could reach over 2,000 offspring. This was only the first generation. He didn't know what would happen in the third or fourth generation. One of the insects approached Jiang, sensing its presence. He turned his body towards it and began to caress its head. He really liked these insects, however. Their abilities and little nines were different. He noticed that the insects had also acquired some new skills. The insect status window appeared. It was called Son of Nine Wings of Miasma. It had 4 abilities. The first one was Poisonous Mist that allowed it to corrode and devour everything it touched. The second one was Camouflage. This ability allowed it to camouflage itself using the reflection of its wings. The third one was Frenzy. When it used this ability, the devouring value was continuously consumed, in exchange temporarily increasing strength and speed. The fourth and final ability was called Self-Destruction. This ability allowed it to explode its body, releasing toxins and causing massive damage in the process. Jiang thought that the camouflage and self-destruction skills seemed quite useful. While he was lost in his thoughts, Little Nine approached him from behind and gave him a hug. She closed her eyes and with a smile, she caught his attention. Upon hearing her voice, Jiang snapped out of his trance, turned his head slightly towards her, and couldn't help but smile and feel at ease. He turned his body towards her, began to caress her head, and with a smile thought that she seemed to have changed but not much. Little Nine closed her eyes, placed her hands on her chest, and with a joyful smile informed him that she had finished the process of breeding the insects. Then, she took Jiang's arm with both hands and told him that she wanted to rest. Upon hearing this, he asked her what she meant by resting. At that moment her body began to disappear. Jiang slightly turned his head towards his hand and upon seeing this, he became somewhat confused. He started wondering where she had gone, and at that moment, a system window appeared to inform him that Little Nine had returned to the insect nest. Jiang started looking at his hand and couldn't help but smile and feel relieved. The system space was incredible. It was a space that could accommodate swarms of insects. Now it didn't matter how many swarms there were. They could all hide within the system, so Jiang would no longer be afraid of being discovered by anyone. The insect nest was a new ability that he had acquired. It was an ability that was granted at maximum level, which meant that it couldn't be leveled up. Jiang activated Little Nine's mark, started looking at his hand and saw that she was sleeping peacefully. He realized that after reproduction, insects needed to sleep. Jiang remembered that he had just acquired a new ability, so he decided to test it out and see how it worked. He extended his hand to the side and activated the skill. As he did this, his body began to emit a powerful and suffocating energy, and his eyes started to shine. Once Jiang activated the ability, the insects that were by his side turned their heads towards him and started looking at him with a murderous gaze. Jiang turned his head towards them and with a murderous look, he realized how this ability worked. He extended his hand towards the sky and it began to absorb the insects. This new ability allowed Jiang to control the swarm of insects. He turned his head towards his hand and thought that using this skill was as easy as moving an arm. While Jiang's eyes were shining, he started looking ahead and was amazed. By using this ability, he could also use the senses of the insects. Now Jiang could perceive the world in the same way insects did. As he looked around, he saw that this place was filled with monsters, hidden and ready to stalk their prey. Jiang turned his head to one side and upon seeing the behavior of the insects, he couldn't help but smile. He realized that they were also excited. With a killer look, Jiang and the insects began to stare at the monsters. While his body was surrounded by Little Nine's poisonous mist, he gave them the order to attack as it was time to test their new abilities. Upon hearing his command, thousands of insects destroyed a nearby building into pieces to attract the attention of all the monsters in the area. Their plan worked, as all the monsters near the area turned their heads towards where they were and slowly started approaching to see what was happening. Jiang decided not to wait any longer and go after the monsters. While his body was releasing Little Nine's poisonous mist, he began to approach the monsters, who soon realized what was about to happen. They tried to escape, but it was already too late. Just before they could make a move, the poisonous mist started rapidly approaching them. In a matter of seconds, the poisonous mist stuck to the monsters and slowly began to corrode their bodies, causing them to feel immense pain. Not long after, all the monsters that had been affected by it lost their lives and fell to the ground. Now that they were dead, the poisonous mist slowly started devouring them. Jiang approached the corpses and began to stare at them intently. With the swarm of insects, there was almost no need for him to take action. Now, the reach of the poisonous mist was much larger, and it devoured its targets faster and more extensively. Additionally, he now had shared vision with the ability called Dominion. Common monsters could no longer hide from the swarm of insects. Zhang turned his head to one side, and as he watched Little Nine's poisonous mist slowly devouring the monster corpses, he started to smile and thought that soon he would be able to breed more insects. He remembered that he hadn't looked carefully at how much devouring value was needed for the next insect breeding. Thinking about this, he opened the system window. Upon seeing what had appeared on the system interface, Zhang was shocked and began to wonder what was happening and what this was. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part,